Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of My Future Energy Career. My name is Jalen and I am here with today's STEM hero, Barsten. Welcome, Kira.
Hi, thanks, Jalen.
Yeah, so Kira Barsten is a sustainability analyst, and without further ado, I will pass it off to her and she can talk a little bit more about herself and her career.
Yeah, thanks. So my name is Barsten, and I was previously a sustainability analyst with the City of Mountainview, primarily focusing on community engagement and outreach projects. I got there through after college. I enrolled in the Climate Corps Fellowship, and that was a 10-month fellowship with the City of Mountainview. And then after that, I was hired on full time as the community engagement outreach analyst. I handled a lot of projects in our sustainability action plan, and they were primarily focused on encouraging behavior change with our residents and our businesses, and just working on how Mountain View overall can become a more sustainable community.
Yeah, that sounds like some great work that you're doing. But yeah, moving on, we'll go on to where you're from.
Yeah, so I'm from Los Gatos, which is a small town in the Bay Area near San Jose. I have a sister and a dog and two parents. I didn't really come from an environmental background necessarily. My dad is a chiropractor and my mom is an accountant, but we grew up hiking and I just really had a love for the outdoors. And as I got older, that kind of transformed into this concern about our natural systems and more broadly concern about climate change and the societal concerns that climate change poses. And my sister kind of followed a parallel path. So she also works in the environmental space, but more focused on environmental justice and food systems. So she's really interested in how we can make the world a better place through food. And then these are just some photos of that's me and my sister in Castle Rock, where I grew up hiking. And just that's my dog. So yeah, I grew up spending a lot of time outside, which I think kind of cultivated this love for the environment that kind of transitioned into what I do today.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for sharing once again. So many different avenues and sectors you can go into with environmentalism. We will move on to some of your interests.
Yeah, I just kind of put an assortment of photos here, but as I mentioned, I really like backpacking and camping and hiking. Being outside is definitely my favorite thing to do. I also really like skiing. I'm currently living in Colorado and working at a ski resort, so I get to ski a lot. And then I really like knitting, and so that's a photo of me with my unfinished knitting project, a hat on my head. And then I really like cooking. I've been vegan for a few years, and so I get really creative with what I can cook. In that photo, I learned how to make vegan naan, so that was really tasty. And then I recently picked up running, which I never thought I would enjoy running. But one day I just decided to sign up for a half marathon and make myself run. And now I really enjoy running, and it's just a really great way to be outside. And it's also been really interesting because when I run in different areas, I am a lot more in tune now to like the air quality, where when I'm running on streets, I can like tell it's more polluted than when I'm running maybe in like a more outdoor nature setting. And I love reading. It's one of the main ways I keep advancing my learning and my knowledge about different environmental issues. And then I've also really gotten into gardening and sustainable agriculture lately.
Awesome. Yeah, a lot of interest here, a lot of interesting interests here. And yeah, thank you for sharing. And next we'll go into your educational pathway.
Mhm. Yeah, so I went to UC Berkeley in the California Bay Area for 4 years. I graduated in May of 2019, and I studied society and environment with a concentration in global and environmental politics. I had initially gone to Berkeley with an environmental science major because I really liked kind of the more mathematic biology side of environmental issues. And I kind of had a moment my freshman year where I was like, you know what, like I think I actually want to focus more on the social side of these issues. And so that's where society and environment came in. And then I had a minor in peace and conflict studies, and then another minor in conservation and resource studies. And that one I got to kind of design my own minor. So I focused on climate change science and economics. And then throughout my time at Berkeley, I had a variety of like internships and different activities that I was involved in, ranging from I had an internship with the Environmental Law Division of the Department of Justice, and I did some environmental policy work through student government, and then a variety of like communications, marketing, education. Like I tried it all because I really had no idea what I wanted to do within the environmental space. And then my favorite class that I took while I was there was my senior year. My final semester is a class called Wealth and Poverty with Robert Reich. She was the former Secretary of Labor under President Clinton. But basically this issue, like this class wasn't focused at all on environmental issues. It was focused more on income inequality and wealth inequality, and a variety of gaps within the US. And it was really interesting for me to kind of look at all those issues through a lens of environmentalism and kind of think about how these issues are all connected to one another.
Great. Yeah. Thank you again for sharing. I really like how you highlight how diverse the environmental field is with the multiple subjects that you studied in college. But moving on, we will go on to some things you had to learn to get where you are today.
Yeah, so something I definitely had to learn while I was working was how to take constructive criticism. I think coming out of college and like Berkeley, there's very much this kind of idea of like, you're so smart, like you're gonna change the world, like you're doing all these great things. And I was like, yeah, I'm awesome. And not that I'm not awesome, but I definitely had to learn how to like take feedback that I didn't, especially feedback that I didn't necessarily agree with. Um, and not take it personally and like look at it as like, okay, this is just a reflection of like different ways of doing things. It's not an attack on like who I am or what I care about. And I think just kind of developing a thicker skin is really important for the workplace, to try and not take like any kind of different ideas very personally. I also had to learn how to ask a lot of questions. Part of that was because I really had, and kind of still to a degree, like didn't know what I wanted to do or what my space was within environmental work. And so that involved asking people a lot of questions about who, like what they were interested in, how they got there, how they figured out what they were interested in. And then also in my work setting, I was kind of thrown in like from my fellowship, the previous analyst had left. And so I was, as a fresh out of college graduate, I was kind of assuming the role of a full-time analyst. And so that was a lot of stuff that I didn't know how to do. And so I was just asking a lot of questions and not trying to like pretend I knew what I was doing when I didn't know what I was doing, and just figure out like, what is the best way to do this? What do you recommend about this? I'm really not sure about that. And that can be kind of uncomfortable to admit that maybe you don't know what you're doing all the time. But so I just really had to learn how to ask questions with that. And then I also really had to learn how to pay attention to detail. So I was working for a local government, and the things that the government has like a very strict standards for what it puts out to the public and how it communicates with folks. And that's something that I hadn't experienced as much previously. My previous roles with government, I hadn't been doing much public facing work, so it wasn't as big of a deal. But in this role, it was very public facing. And so I really had to pay attention to everything that we were saying and making sure that there were no mistakes. And that was something that I hadn't put as much focus on before. And then something also, just to get to my current position, I had to really learn how to tell a story of like who I am and why I care about what I care about and how I'm qualified to do something. I think coming out of college, like you kind of have miscellaneous things on your resume, and I really had to learn how to weave a story out of those things that maybe didn't seem like they fit together on paper, but to kind of use that to tell a story for like why I'm here and why I'm qualified to do this. And the last thing I'll say is that in my job, I really learned it was very helpful to figure out like who was kind of the expert on different things and to learn who to go to when I had different questions or different problems, so that I spent less time figuring out who to talk to and more time working on an issue after talking to the right person. And that definitely took some time to kind of expand my network and learn, who specializes in what.
Awesome. Yeah. Some great advice coming from our STEM hero. But yeah, moving on, we'll go on to some more advice you can offer us.
Yeah, so I just picked a few kind of miscellaneous things. I work in primarily like in sustainability and local government, and behavior change, but I'm really interested in waste. I think waste is a really fascinating issue just because it's something that everyone deals with. Like everyone makes trash for the most part, and it's very tangible. Like you can see your impact with the trash that you're creating. And then I also think waste is kind of like a metaphor for how we treat kind of our systems and each other and the planet as a whole. It's like things we can just throw away. And so I really like thinking about trash, and I would love for everyone to conduct a trash audit at home. And it's something you can just look up online to find more info about. But basically, you'll like live your life normally for a week, and then at the end of the week, you'll look and see like what waste you're creating. It's kind of a way to start thinking about like how can you maybe eliminate some of that waste. Like, oh, if you notice you're using a lot of one thing, what's maybe a more sustainable or reusable swap to do. So that's really fun, and I'd recommend everyone looking at it. And then coming from a local government perspective, I would really like to encourage everyone to get involved with your local government. It's really easy to attend council meetings now because they're all on Zoom. And you can just check in and see what your council is or isn't doing. I think before I was working for the government, I really didn't think too much about my local government. And then I started seeing like all of the pathways for change and all the things that people were pushing for and the things that people weren't pushing for. And I was like, wow, like my local council would probably, like my town would probably be a better place if like more people like me like showed up to meetings and pushed for the things that we wanted. And it usually tends to be just like kind of older retired people that show up to these meetings, or people that are like really angry about something. But I think being involved with our local, like with your local government, is a really powerful thing, and not enough people do it. And so I definitely recommend doing that. And then also some advice I'd like to give is to not be afraid to like try new things and really not like them. So many internships and activities and classes and things that I tried out like really didn't like, but I didn't look at it as like a failure, like, oh my gosh, I just spent all this time doing something I don't like. I looked at it instead as like, this was really valuable because it helped kind of narrow down what I do care about and what my space within this field is. And I really looked at, okay, not just that I didn't like something, but specifically why don't I like it, and then kind of naming that, which helped me kind of navigate my next steps. So definitely don't be afraid to try things that you don't like, and then also definitely think critically about what specifically you don't like about it. Like, is it the work style? Is it what you're working on? Is it how you're working, etc.? And then my last piece of advice is to just talk to as many like students and professionals that you can to hear their stories. Like I set up pre-COVID, I would set up coffee chats all the time with people working in other fields and other governments, et cetera, just to kind of hear their story and see how they figured out what they want to do, and kind of use that to help apply to maybe me figuring out what I want to do. And even now, like I have phone calls all the time with people that are like just graduating from college that want to hear my experience. And it's just a lot of kind of bouncing things off each other, because like what you might want to work on, you may have never even heard of it before. And so talking to a lot of people can help expose you to like all the different possibilities and different things. And you can kind of start to like figure out like, oh, like I'd never thought of that, but that sounds really interesting. And maybe I want to pursue that, and figuring out how you might pursue that, et cetera, I think is very helpful.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you again for sharing. And so for my first question, I wanted to ask you, what was your favorite thing that you learned in a job position that you had?
That's a good question. Let me think. I think my favorite thing that I learned was just how like local government operates and how change is enacted on a local level, and kind of what the process is from like like residents wanting something and advocating something for, to like all the way going through to making an action plan, to city staff like myself working on it. I had really no idea how that process worked. And so it was really just fun for me to learn more about that, so that I can now apply that anywhere I go and anywhere I live as a resident, now that I know kind of how it works on the back end. And I think I just didn't realize like how long everything takes. But it was very helpful to keep in mind, kind of like we have a tendency to like ask for something and want it to happen right away. And it was really powerful to see like the advocates in Mountain View that were working on something for like 5 years and they never gave up, and just that's how long it takes sometimes. And so I really learned a lot about like how long to push for something, and then also like kind of what that process looks like for getting things moving.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you again for sharing.
Hmm.
Well, that pretty much wraps up the interview. I just want to take this time to extend a big, big, big thank you to Kira for coming on to this webinar and sharing a little bit more about your career and educational pathway. And I just want to give another thank you to everyone watching. If you want to see more webinars like this one, you can go to our Vimeo or YouTube page at the Energy Coalition, or you can log on to peakstudents.org to view our full webinar library.